This week on the agenda in New China, as the People's Republic marks its 75th founding anniversary, we'll look at the past and future of relations with the UK. On October the 1st, the People's Republic of China marked its 75th anniversary. In this special edition of the agenda, we're looking back at relations between the UK and China over the past 3/4 of a century and considering where they may be headed in the future. Sir Sherard Cowper-Coles is the chairman of the China-Britain Business Council. He's had a lifelong interest in China and first visited the country back in the 1980s. So I asked him what differences he has observed in the past 40 years.
Well, obviously, China has changed. It's one of the most extraordinary transitions in human history. When I first went there in 1985, the streets of Beijing were empty apart from thousands of bicycles. But my acquaintance with China began much, much earlier than 1985, when I was a schoolboy at a boarding school in Kent. We had a history master, at least he pretended to be a history master, a Lao She. He taught us for a year about China, about the history of the Chinese Republic, about Dr. Sun Yat-sen, about the warlords, the Japanese invasion, the triumph of the Communist Party.
Your interest in China started
My interest in China started then. And then when I joined the diplomatic service straight from Oxford, you're tested on your aptitude for hard languages. I chose Arabic because in those days the Camel Corps, the Arabists, ruled the diplomatic service.
Do you speak fluent Arabic?
I do speak fluent Arabic.
Do you speak any Chinese?
Only a few words.
So speaking fluent Arabic, you have been working with China over the past decade.
I said to Premier Li Qiang in Beijing in May, I said, "Wo ai Zhongguo," and he laughed at my terrible Putonghua.
Yeah, it's like, I love China. That's just what you said to him.
Yes.
And what did he say?
He laughed. He didn't.
What is the reason behind your career choice of working with China back then?
Well, I went into the Foreign Office. I did all sorts of jobs, working for the head of the Foreign Office, working as Chief of Staff for the Foreign Minister. China is a vast market. It's a very sophisticated market. Of course, there are challenges, the regulatory environment, language, culture. I think one area where China has made huge progress is in protecting foreign intellectual property. It used to be a worry if you went to China, you would have your intellectual property purloined in some way. That has been addressed by China very successfully. So it's a challenging market, but the rewards are enormous. China can transform your business. I mean, we had one member who made, I don't know if you know what a jukebox is, a little business outside Leeds in Yorkshire, where this man made electronic faux 1960s jukeboxes, and he was selling one a week. And then he got a phone call from China, "We want 50 a week." And this man has become a millionaire through selling jukeboxes to China. It's that sort of effect.
So the two countries are complementary in many
ways. Very much so. And we're sitting here in the city of London, this amazing view. And of course, Britain is primarily a service economy. China is moving rapidly towards a service economy, but it's still the great manufacturing economy, the greatest manufacturing economy on earth.
And also mutual trust is very important, apparently, and there are so many organizations that are trying their best to contribute to that, including the CBBC and CCC UK.
Yes.
And how do you think these two organizations are working together to
very
facilitate
closely.
trade ties?
I mean, Mr. Feng Wenjian, who's also General Manager of the Bank of China here, he's a great friend of the UK. He's also a personal friend. He and I meet regularly, we talk even more often, we work together. Next January we'll be taking part with the 48 Group Club in the annual Icebreakers Dinner, which is the really central celebration of the UK-China economic and commercial relationship.
So we know geopolitical tensions often spill over into the economic realm, and you said, I'm quoting you, that you want the CBBC to be an advocate for economic and commercial engagement between the UK and China in as apolitical a way as possible. Does it suggest that it is not that easy?
No, it hasn't been easy. We've had a difficult time. We've had I don't know, 5 prime ministers in the UK in almost as many years. We've had a Conservative Party ridden with tensions about attitudes to China. We've now got a government that I hope, believe, almost know will be much more pragmatic to China. I'm very hopeful that we're entering, I wouldn't call it a golden era, but certainly a new era of pragmatic cooperation that is win-win in both sides' interests.
And as a business professional, what are you expecting from the, you said, new era? And we know the newly elected Labour government said it would reassess the UK's relations with China within 100 days of taking office. And what are you expecting from that?
Well, I hope very much, and the Foreign Secretary has already said this, that we can resume engagement at the level of Cabinet Minister. We have goods and services to sell China. We have goods and services we need from China. I mean, the truth is, if we're serious about the transition to net zero, we can't do it without Chinese battery technology, without Chinese solar panels, without Chinese wind turbines. So we have to work together.
Speaking of net zero, so recently the new Chancellor said the UK wouldn't follow suit to impose additional tariffs on Chinese-made EVs. So have you seen an increasing trend in China-UK cooperation in the field of net zero?
Very much so. I mean, all sorts of areas, a lot going on. I mean, if we go down to the street below, we will see
BYD buses.
BYD, but not just BYD buses, Build Your Dreams. The London Electric Vehicle Company, owned by Geely. I drive a hybrid Volvo, owned by Geely. And I hope we'll see many more Chinese electric vehicles in the UK.
You may like it, but some are saying that China is overproducing its solar panels, its electric vehicles, and China is dumping its products in the European market. But we do see different rhetoric here.
It's better to have an electric vehicle made in a factory in Shenzhen or in the Yangtze Valley.
That are more affordable.
More affordable, more efficient. And to have financial services manufactured here in the City of London and sold into China, or architectural services, or whatever it may be. That's the theory of comparative advantage at work.
In the meantime, how much weight do you think the US carries in China-UK relations?
Well, it has had a negative influence in the past. I've publicly said what is well known, that the second decision by the Boris Johnson's government to rip Huawei equipment out of the UK telecoms network wasn't driven by national security. It was driven by American pressure. It's cost Britain about £10 billion and a 3-year delay in the rollout of 5G. So it's a challenge. We have to pursue our national interests, and we have to realize that national security, which is genuine and must be protected, is not the same as America's national superiority. There's a difference. And so Britain needs to stand up for its own national interests, the interests of our people, working with our European partners, and not succumb to pressure from others where it's not in our national interest to do so.
The The first Westerners to initiate relations with the People's Republic of China were a group of British businessmen who visited in the early 1950s to begin trade relationships which continue to this day. These icebreakers became known as the 48 Group Club. The club's honorary president, Stephen Perry, whose father was one of those pioneers, sat down with me to discuss China-UK ties and his memories of those early days.
I lost my father for long periods of time. He would be in China 3 to 5 months a year, and I didn't understand what China meant. It was a very different place with different people, with different ideas, but it was like getting a story at bedtime at night.
And you didn't know your father was on an ice-breaking mission?
No, I had no idea at all. Later in life, all of us, the 5 children, began to understand the difficulty that he had of making the decision to give up everything in his life and transfer it all to helping trade with China. I think he was open to doing something with his life that had more contribution to humanity. He took a big risk, but it worked out okay. Of course, as you know, my father was shocked beyond all imagination at the deprivation and the horrors of what he saw in China in 1953. He was just reduced to tears. He never cried. I never saw him cry. But he saw such terrible things that had happened to the Chinese people.
When your father was in China back in the 1950s, China was really poor.
Yes.
And what gave him the confidence to sell products to a country that was experiencing poverty?
I don't think he was there to sell products to China. That was one aspect of it. He was there to buy from China as well. It was always considered to be a two-way trade. This was about cementing peace, cementing friendship.
What commodities did your father buy from China and vice versa back then?
Feathers was a big one. Feathers and downs. I grew up selling them to Europe and to the United States. Casings, which is the casing is the outside of the stomach of the pig, and it's used to wrap the sausage in. There are lots of oils, tongue oil. There's a lot of different things. But we started the trade in porcelain. Restarted the trade in porcelain. There was a lot of trade in porcelain from the 17th century, and glass and basketware and floor coverings, all sorts of things.
So you went to China back in the 1970s yourself,
Yes.
the first time, having learned so much about China. What was your experience like?
It was, I wouldn't say it was like my father's, because he walked into terrible poverty. For me, it was absolutely amazing. I'd never come across anything like it. The visual impact of fields everywhere, right up to the edge of the railway track. Every piece of land was used for producing food and other things. I think the thing that I was left with was the people of China. That what was translating China towards being a country of modernity was the people. They were determined to work all hours of the day. Whatever they did, they were doing it with great commitment. And the people of China was what I came away with as my strongest feeling. China is able to pull a group of people together to work out how to build trade from China to Europe through the land routes. That was being done for 40 years before they even got to the point of announcing it under Xi Jinping. So China has this long-term approach to planning. It has long-term, medium-term and short-term. And it's able to do all these things in a very sophisticated way.
So what you saw was a different governance system right there, and it changed your perception of China.
Yes.
And were you expecting something like the reform and opening up would come up?
At that stage, I was trying to find a way to do long-term business with China, which at that stage was actually impossible, but that didn't stop me thinking about it. And I read very carefully everything from the 1978 Third Plenum, and I got no idea what was going to happen. They were going to move 800 million people off the land into factories and becoming people who were in manufacturing and service industries. We had no idea that that's what was there. It took me 20, 30 years to begin to understand it. If you take, for example, in about 15 years ago, everybody wondered why China was building so many roads and highways, but yet had no car manufacturing company. They innovated by creating joint ventures between the foreign car company and the Chinese car companies. They brought together some of the great scientists in China to work out how to make the next generation of car, which, as you know now, is the electric car. Nobody else was thinking of that. China worked out how to make the electric car and operate it inside China, and China started exporting their cars because it's very important to the new energies.
But now the EU has slammed additional tariffs on the Chinese-made electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because China is supporting its electric vehicle business too much with the subsidies?
What China is doing is they're making electric cars for the benefit of the people of China, and they're priced at the price that they ought to be to get the attention of the market. That's standard marketing, whether it's America or Europe or China. So what the Chinese are doing is offering that. So when the Europeans put on the tariff, what do the Chinese say? Hold on a second, we've given your car companies a fortune in access to the Chinese market. We didn't put tariffs on them. You put tariffs on us, we'll put tariffs on you. And all the car companies in Europe said, don't put the tariffs on. But these rather silly people in the EU bureaucracy, following American advice, want to try and make life difficult for China. And it's involved in a battle with China, which I don't think it will win.
So you think that the US has a huge influence on EU's China policy?
The Americans have put the tariffs on, but they're not going to have any much imports of electric cars. They're going to carry on with the petrol cars because that's what they've been developing the market for years. So there's a lack of reality at the moment about Europe's attitude. The problem for Europe is it wants to act tough like the Americans, and it can't, because it doesn't have the power, the scale, and the imagination. And that's why Mercedes and people like this have said, no, don't put the tariffs on, because they know that their world markets will be impacted as a result.
The ice-breaking trip your father made 70 years ago, let's look back at history, broke the trade embargo that some Western countries imposed in China, and now China's trade tensions, relations with some countries, including the US and the EU, you were talking about, have soured again. So do you think it will get better or worse, and what is different now?
My reading of it is that China saw this a long time ago. In the beginning of the 21st century, I could see China, it was called going global. What did going global mean? It meant moving the production out of China to different parts of the world. Globalization is under threat. Protectionism is happening everywhere. But where's it happening? It's happening in Europe and North America. Why? Because they don't have global economies. They have national economies, and their companies make things in their countries, and they want to continue to make them in their countries because they want to employ their people.
Now, how about the UK government? Do you think the Labour government could be different when it comes to its China policy compared with the previous government?
The Conservatives developed a new trade policy to become important in Asia. Well, I've been saying for a long time, China's focused on Asia. But if you look at it, if we want to be significant in Asia, we're going to have a proper relationship with China. There's a lot of opportunity for the British government, for the Labour government, to reposition itself with the Chinese. It'll have to be very careful about how it handles the United States. There are more and more people becoming experienced in the UK about China, but we have to find the roads to recover that relationship. But it can be done.
Still to come here on the agenda, the high-tech future of China-UK relations. We'll speak to Laura Citron, the CEO of London & Partners.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Welcome back to the agenda. Before the break, we heard much of the history of relations between China and the UK over the past 75 years. But what of the future? China is currently the UK's sixth largest trading partner, worth around $117 billion a year. To date, much of that comes from traditional sectors like real estate. But as Laura Citron, CEO of London & Partners, an organisation that promotes London's growth, told me, emerging industries like fintech, electric vehicles and life sciences are set to dominate in the near future.
I've been really lucky that in my career I've lived in lots of different countries around the world, and I've led teams in lots of different parts of the world. And I think that's helped me because it's given me that external view on the UK. And that helped me to put myself, I think, in the shoes and to empathise better with our international investors and to think about how do we really need to support them to understand the opportunities, to navigate a system that's unfamiliar and not to assume too much knowledge.
London & Partners has been promoting the city as a global hub. And based on your experience, how do you think that the company's strategies when it comes to China have developed and evolved over the past years?
China has always been a core market for London & Partners, and it continues to be one of our core markets. So if we go back, a lot of the investment from China to the UK was in quite traditional real estate and financial services. And whilst that's still very important, we as a company are much more focused on finding that new innovation and encouraging innovative new companies to come and expand into London.
So do you see the shift from the traditional real estate industry? We see the walkie-talkie building in London. It was invested by a Chinese company to fintech, automotive and other sectors. So if I were a Chinese investor, I would be wondering what businesses have the most potential for further collaboration between the two countries?
Yeah, great question. So London's a great place to scale a business. When we look at the kinds of Chinese businesses that tend to come and be successful here in recent years, lots of fintech and payments companies, some around innovation in smart cities and around electric vehicles, and also around gaming technologies, and some life sciences businesses have also done well. So it's quite broad. As you would expect in an economy as big as China, which has such broad sectoral strengths.
What do you think makes London stand out compared with other cities, let's say New York or Singapore?
So I think for Chinese companies, London is really that rest of world gateway. And what we often see is that a Chinese business will come to London as its first international office, because by being in London, it puts you on that global stage. London is a very, very diverse and international business city. And if you're selling a B2B, so you're selling to businesses, it's a very dense centre of global decision makers. So you can come to London and win a contract, not just for the UK, but for all of Europe or all of the Europe and the Middle East.
Do you think it is still the case after Brexit?
Absolutely. London has one of the most diverse and large skilled workforces in the world. We see that our international student numbers are really strong. We attract the best talent from around the world. We have some of the world's top universities in London. And investors tell us that talent is still the #1 reason they come to London. So we've helped lots of different Chinese companies to invest in London over the years. And that ranges from really big household names. We helped Baidu, Tencent, Alibaba to set up their offices here. In fact, your own company, CGTN, we helped you to set up your office in London as well. So some of the really big Chinese businesses.
So one of the key challenges in dealing with China is to navigate the complex international investment environment. So what can London & Partners do to attract more investment from China?
We've always taken a very long-term view on China because we know that long-term relationships are very important in a changing geopolitical environment. We're really focused on client service. So our role is to be that shortcut to help people spend their time as efficiently as possible in the right meetings with the right places and at the right events, and always trying to maintain those really, really high levels of client service is at the core of what we do.
Mm-hmm. And you get your feedback from some Chinese business professionals investing in London, and what is the most that you have got from them? What are the challenges or obstacles that they have met in the city when they invest in the country?
So the typical obstacles that Chinese businesses face when they come over, other than sometimes there are geopolitical challenges, but assuming that's not an issue, are actually the same as we see for most high growth companies, regardless of where they come from. I don't think they're particularly specific to Chinese businesses. One of the biggest ones that people don't think about so much is the company culture. One of the key challenges is translating a culture internationally, especially if it's if you haven't got an international outpost yet. Because, as we know, culture is such an important driver of a company's growth. And if you have an innovative business, having that culture of innovation is really core. It's often the secret sauce to that business. A lot of what we do is making sure that they're working with the right expert partners and then supporting them directly to be networking within their sector, meeting the right investors, the right corporates, the right influencers.
Your company, London & Partners, also works for other countries, and compared with other countries, how do you think that China is different, or Chinese businesses are different?
I think one of the big differences with Chinese investors is because China is such a big domestic market, the businesses tend to come internationally when they're at quite a late stage of development. So the kind of business that would come to London from China is already well established, maybe has thousands of employees, potentially is already listed on a Chinese stock exchange. That's quite different from the kind of investor that might come from Paris or from Berlin, where they will come to London to raise a Series A. So they'll come to London really quite an early stage in their development. So we're dealing with a much smaller, much less mature business, whereas our Chinese clients tend to be quite large and well established.
And do you think it's changing now gradually? There used to be big companies from China expanding overseas, let's say to London. Probably there are some startup companies from China now trying to get access to the European market.
Absolutely. We're working with Chinese startups, and I think that's really exciting. And I hope that more Chinese, scale-ups, maybe not startups. I hope that more Chinese scale-ups will choose also to expand to the UK, and we really look forward to working with them when they do.
Looking back at the history of London & Partners, how do you personally envision the future of this relationship evolving, let's say, over the next decade?
Well, if I knew how the future of the UK-China relationship would evolve over the next decade, I probably wouldn't do this job. But I think China will remain a very important market for London, for trade and for investment, and investment across different asset classes. We've talked today about real estate, but also about financial services and different kinds of technology. And I think that whilst the geopolitics might change, that basic trading relationship will likely endure in some way or other. And I think China continues to be a really important market for London for tourists and also for students. And so we're looking forward to continuing to work with our partners in China on that.
You can watch every episode of The Agenda in full on CGTN Europe's YouTube channel. And for exclusive extra content from me, my guests and the rest of the team, don't forget to check out The Agenda Show on TikTok.
Coming up on a future agenda, the migrant crisis. Is it time to rethink Europe's approach to asylum seekers? But for now, from me, Jianhua, and all the Agenda team in London, it's goodbye.